Hello and welcome to the Thomas Benjamin Wilde Esquire podcast/bodcast. These interviews were done as a series of ongoing content originally for my Patreon community. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Patreon, it's a fantastic platform where audiences can subscribe on a monthly basis to their favourite artists and creators and receive access to all kinds of exclusive content, including first look videos, exclusive material, merch deals and all those kind of things. If you are interested in joining my Patreon community, then you can look below for the link and you can have a look at the details on how to subscribe there. If not, then just sit back and enjoy. Today I am with the fantastic Hannah Piera. I've said that right, haven't I?
You have.
Yeah, brilliant. Who is a vintage singer, songbird, performer at various events based on the Isle of Wight. So Hannah, hi. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Coping within the current circumstances at the moment, I think. So yeah, I mean, we've known each other for quite some time now, haven't we? How did we first end up meeting?
I think it was 2 years ago at the Haven Street 1940s weekend.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so through Harry and Edna, really.
Yeah, so just as a bit of kind of a background to this, Harry and Edna used to live in Milton Keynes, which is just down the road from where I live in Bedford. And they used to have Edna's Vintage nightclub, which ran from the stables in Milton Keynes. Actually, where I forgot, they gave me my first gig. So Harry and Edna actually gave me my first gig and actually led me to what I'm doing now, really. If you're interested in that kind of thing, you can read my biography on my Patreon account. I can tell you're laughing there, Hannah, but I have actually written my history, my origin story on my Patreon. Which has been quite interesting. So we met 2 years ago. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the Isle of Wight 40s weekend? Because you're involved in that, are you, to some extent? Are you involved in the organisation of it?
No, not really. It was Harry that first said the opportunity might come up, and he knew that I had an interest in vintage music and history. And I had been trying to sort of break out into that a bit more with what I was doing. So he got me the booking, but then also they learned that I was all right with a camera, which is why I ended up coming and taking some of the pictures as well.
Yes, because you're a photographer as well, aren't you? You take photos.
I used to be. Now it's more of a, just a thing to do for fun. So I'm not really in part of the organisation, but they obviously rebooked me last year, which was wonderful, and I was really excited about it again this year. But it's a fab little event at our vintage steam railway here on the island. All working trains. Your ticket gives you a train ride.
Yeah.
And it's full of music all day long, vehicles, home front exhibitions, you name it, it's all there. So it's
great. You can go and play on the steam trains and kind of get on and kind of wave to people as you're leaving the station.
Exactly.
And basically pretend that you live in the past. Because the Isle of Wight's a little bit like that, isn't it? It's a bit kind of... It
is. It's very... you walk back in time. A lot of our towns still have cobbled streets and things like that. So, but it's wonderful. That's one of the, advantages of living here. So.
Yeah. There's definitely an aesthetic. There's definitely an aesthetic that is very appealing, I would say.
There is.
And so we've been doing that for the last couple of years. So did you did that the same first year for the first year that I was there as well then?
Yeah, I think that was it. That was the first time I'd been there, and I think that was the first time you had come down as well. So that's where we met, and it was our first time there.
Excellent. So how long have you actually been performing as Hannah Piera, doing what you do? And also, what other things do you do as well? So tell us about your kind of music.
So
I've been doing it.
I've always been into singing, always been into performing. Growing up, I was always part of amateur dramatics, and I loved musical theatre. And then I went to uni to pursue performing arts, but Unfortunately, it sort of had the adverse effect. I got really bad stage fright through uni. For some reason, it was quite hard actually for someone that lived on the stage to all of a sudden not be able to perform. And then a couple of years later, I worked as a photographer for a local cabaret, and they just happened to find out that I used to sing. So they asked me if I would do something at a really small event, and it was a 1940s event. And I did it, and I loved it, and thought perhaps now was the time to try and work on this. And I did. I worked with this cabaret. They were called the Blue Moon Review, and eventually I got to the point where I felt confident enough that I could start doing it again. So my stage fright sort of kicked in around 2010, and I didn't come back to the stage till about 2014, 15. So it was around 2015 I started putting myself out there to get bookings. At that point, I was looking for anything just to get experience and exposure. Word of mouth on the island is so important. And then I tried to find a niche, and I really wanted it to be something around the vintage. I'd been exposed to a lot of vintage singers as a child, so it was something I was very passionate about. I also love history, so that was something I wanted to...
the history thing ties in with where you work, doesn't it? Because you work
does.
At where is it you work again?
I work at Carisbrooke Castle, so you don't get more historic than that.
So what is for anybody? Because I've got people who potentially be listening to this in America and other places like that. What is Carisbrooke Castle?
So Carisbrooke Castle is a Norman fortress that sits at the heart of the island. There's evidence to suggest it goes back to Roman times, Saxon times, but we absolutely know sort of around the Norman conquest, that's when the castle started as we see it today. And one of the unique points of our castle is it has a working donkey wheel. So historically, donkeys would have turned that wheel and brought up water for the people stationed at the castle. And the wonderful thing about my job is I actually look after the donkeys that are there to this day. So they obviously don't work very hard at all anymore. They're actually spoilt. But that's my job. I look after donkeys in a castle. It's fantastic.
So we'll talk about the donkeys a little bit later on. You mentioned kind of that you've been listening to kind of old vintage music from young age. Is that an influence from parents or kind of grandparents or?
It's my parents for sure. My grandparents too. I mean, the first vinyl my mum ever brought me was The Sound of Music. I must have been about 10. And she got me into things like Judy Garland, Doris Day, and I just loved it. But sort of growing up in the 90s and noughties, other people weren't really into that music.
No.
So I was on my own for that. So it's been nice to meet like-minded people.
It's that's how you find musical theatre, isn't it? Though, kind of joining that crowd at school and kind of being in musicals and things like that. That's kind of my background a little bit. Although I like to kind of sell my punk rock credentials as well. So what made you start singing then? What made you start singing kind of with your act now?
I don't know. I really think it all comes back to 2 years ago at the Steam Railway, being given that opportunity, loving it so much, seeing the emotional reaction that some people have to those songs. I felt there was definitely something there I could work with, and actually something that I could really enjoy. And I obviously, I do get booked for other things that aren't predominantly vintage, but there's such a vintage community on the island that your summers can get booked up very quickly if you are a 1940s reenactor or singer. They love it. So yeah, the 40s really came from that first booking through Harry at the Steam Railway, and it sort of
we've got
there.
a lot to owe to kind of Harry and Edna, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Because obviously you've kind of they pushed you into doing it again, which is great, and obviously.
Yeah, I think they were the catalyst that sort of really pushed me in that direction. So, yeah. Thanks, Harry.
That's good. So, your other job is looking after the donkeys at Carisbrooke Castle.
Yes.
How has that worked during lockdown?
Well, actually, it's given me a sense of normality, believe it or not, because of course they still need looking after in the same way that they would do if we were open. So it's kind of normal. I mean, there was a bit of a stress to begin with, worrying about, feed supplies and all that, but actually that's all run very smoothly, touch wood. So it's actually given me, a chance to be distracted, I think, from everything that's been going on. And I think donkeys generally save me hundreds of pounds in therapy fees anyway. So yeah, it just feels normal when I'm at work. And to be honest, it's quite nice to enjoy the castle without the people there sometimes.
Well, this is I'm kind of hearing a lot of stories of people, particularly in places like Italy, where they've kind of big holiday tourist destinations, and people actually just being able to kind of be in a massive city without having the tourists around at all.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's quite interesting.
I think it's allowed us some time to appreciate. I mean, we always appreciate where we work because, who can say they look after donkeys in a castle? We're very privileged. But I think it is easy to get complacent in that. So it's been nice to take stock of where we are, what we do, and, how wonderful a job that is.
Yeah, I bet it's been quite nice up at the castle with all that space. Quiet? Has it been quiet up there? It
has been very quiet, which again, it has been another sort of perk almost to being up there on our own. Wildlife has started to take over again. We're seeing so many different birds. We've got kestrels now that are nesting there. It is wonderful to see it like this, and it is almost a shame that it isn't like that all the time, but then we wouldn't have jobs, so
Yeah, well, this is it, isn't it? This is it. And kind of sitting in the garden looking up at the blue skies and thinking, oh, this is lovely. Got to remind myself at some point I'm going to have to go back to work.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and we need to, otherwise we're all going to go insane. Yeah. So is this your dream job? Is this what you want to do for the rest of your life?
When I started working there, it definitely never occurred to me it would be a dream job. I liked history, so the fact I got a job in heritage was great. But when I first started working there, I had nothing to do with the donkeys. I just worked in the shop on admissions. They heard that I had some equine experience and a couple of staff left, for other things. So they roped me in, and then 5 years later, I think it's a job I'm definitely happy in, and I feel like if you can go to work every day and you're excited about the work you do, I certainly have no intention of leaving that. I mean, obviously, like everyone else, I'd like to be a very famous singer,
Yeah,
but
don't we all?
Realistically, it's so wonderful to have a job that I enjoy and I'm passionate about, and I wouldn't say goodbye to that lightly, I think.
No, absolutely. I think I can hear tea coming up the stairs now. Definitely heard footsteps. I definitely heard footsteps. So, as you say, over the summer, you're normally gigging. Do you go off the island much to gig, or do you mostly kind of gig within the island?
I mean, I do go to the mainland. Obviously, it has to work around my job. But there have been a number of gigs that for me have been worth it to take that trip. I mean, getting off the island is very expensive, even for us locals, so it can be difficult. But last year I had my first appearance at Twinwoods, which was so worth it. I mean, that was the main thing we were looking forward to this year, was Twinwoods. So I do take mainland bookings, but I really do have to factor in quite a lot of things around it.
Yeah, and it's quite expensive getting to everyone. The great thing about coming down to perform to you on the island, in fact, is that the steam railway people who run that actually pay for the trip across and all that kind of stuff.
There you go.
Which is quite nice. And the hotel, so we get a little mini holiday across there. But we're not going to get it this year,
No,
which is a shame.
no.
And we have the last couple of years been looked forward to coming across to the Isle of Wight. So on that basis, how has what you do changed in terms of your music? How has that had to change because of lockdown? What have you been doing over the last few months?
Well, this summer, it was going to be so busy. That was that was one of the really tragic things. But obviously, not just me, everyone, I guess, including yourself, we have to keep up our influence, however little mine might be, and our presence. So while I haven't been able to gig, I've jumped on the same sort of train of thought as most other people and done live Facebook streams and things like that, just trying to make sure people don't forget who I am and what I do, especially for my local sort of bookings, just so they remember. It's been an interesting time though. It's given me time to actually take a step back and look at how I brand myself, because as I mentioned, I do other things. I get generic pub bookings. I do a lot in the cabaret circuit down here, and that's not always vintage, but actually in terms of what I display and how I as I said, brand myself, it's given me time to just redo that, really focus on the vintage side of it, and I guess just give a clearer message out in terms of what I do. So it's been a nice admin time, which I wouldn't normally
we've
have.
all had to kind of become experts at social media, and technology, and kind of working out how you can actually kind of create a decent sound through a computer, potentially without the use of a webcam or whatever, or kind of working out the best microphone to buy and all that kind of stuff. So it's been an interesting one, but hopefully it's setting us all up for the future, isn't it? And hopefully kind of we'll be better at promoting ourselves online in the future, whatever that future might look like.
Oh God.
Oh, don't. I'm just worried that this is going to be what it's like for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have that slight worry, but I think maybe this time next year we'll be at the steam railway going, oh, remember last year when we all thought we'd never sing again.
I like this idea of writing off an entire year and just pretending it didn't happen.
So much for the roaring 20s.
We've gone straight to the 30s. That's the problem. Didn't have any of the fun or the kind of decadence at all.
Straight into the depression.
Yeah. So who are kind of your current influences on your work then, would you say? Who should we be looking at? Who do you admire, and should other people, kind of us as an audience, be looking at to see similar stuff to what you do? I
mean, I'm a big advocate of, at the moment especially, looking towards your local performers, maybe people you haven't seen before, heard of, but just look on social media at the people around you that are trying their hardest to keep entertaining, keep themselves sane. So there are lots of performers that I admire, yourself included. I would certainly recommend people check you out.
Well, I'm hoping that the people who are kind of listening to this for the most part have checked out my music a little bit. Who else could you kind of recommend on the scene that you work with or perform with?
I mean, down here on the island, there's a lovely duo called Double Take. They're identical twin sisters. Their harmonies are just stunning, because obviously their voices are almost identical, but the things they can do with their voices together is wonderful. So they're called Double Take, which is great. I've worked with them quite a lot. They're very lovely. Obviously on the island we also have Company B, which they do a lot of the Andrew Sisters stuff together.
Yeah, so they perform with us at the Isle of Wight.
Yeah. There's also a wonderful pair of sisters. They're called the Boogie Woogie Sisters. They do a lot of the 1940s stuff down here, and it's just really fun when they do it. So like I said, there's a massive vintage community down here, and a lot of really great performers. But Double Take I've worked with in particular quite a lot, and I've watched them grow from being quite young performers to now quite confident performers. And like I said, their harmonies are stunning.
No, so some interesting things there. But you don't just do kind of vintage stuff. I noticed you did a whole Disney set the other week, didn't you?
I did. I am partial to the old Disney sing-along, that's for sure. But I think that all kind of feeds into my love of musical theatre. I have a show that I do sort of 3 times a year at a local venue called the Broadway Songbook, and it's a whole evening dedicated to, you know, Broadway and West End songs, and there's always different themes, etc. And we have a bit of karaoke at the end for whoever wants to have a go at singing their favourite tunes. It's always I Dreamed a Dream. Always.
Yeah, I knew people who got through kind of performing arts courses at university just singing that song.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough. Do what you're good at.
It's a good song, but there are others. But yeah, so I also work in a team down here that run the charity cabaret club, and well, sometimes I can actually do vintage stuff there because it's quite appropriate. It is nice sometimes to do a good belter.
Yeah.
So
what kind of things do you have in your kind of more your less vintage set?
I mean, I'm thinking about it now, but they're all still quite vintage songs. I mean, you know, it's your big hits like Don't Rain on My Parade, you know, Shirley Bassey's take on Pink's Get This Party Started, and one of my all-time favourites, Poor Unfortunate Souls, because you know,
it's a great one,
big song,
great one. We've been watching lots of Disney in lockdown, actually.
So have we.
Because Disney Plus came along, perfect timing. We're all kind of a captive audience. So have you got anything coming up anytime soon that people might be interested in? I'm thinking over the next kind of few months, depending on when this actually goes out. I sort of, at the moment, while we're unable to perform at events and venues, I'll be doing live sing-alongs on my Facebook page sort of every other week or so. We're also doing live cabarets sort of every now and then as well. I've had a few bookings for online live streams across various different platforms. So it'll all be coming out on my Facebook page. That quite a lot of them I can't announce yet because they're still working on the sort of the marketing and everything. The actual marketing for it.
So
there are things in the pipeline, and we just need to keep an eye out for it. Yeah, that's the same with me actually. It's very much the same with me. I think this is the really difficult thing with all of this though, is that for this Patreon podcasting, I imagined I'd be kind of doing this from gigs and kind of backstage with people, and we'd be kind of like sitting together having a laugh and a joke and all that kind of thing. So patrons, I promise you at some point that will be coming. But for the time being, everything's having to be really remote. So all these kind of remote gigs and kind of virtual gigs, how are you finding them?
They're good fun, but there is almost an awkwardness when you've got no audience to applaud you. It's just that really odd thing when you finish a song and you're like, thanks.
You're taught as a performer that you have to wait for the applause.
Yeah, and then there isn't one, and it's like all your worst nightmares coming true.
What I've been trying to do is fill that space by just starting to talk straight away. Go, thank you very much, and then Karen going straight into talking straight afterwards. Because I have watched some performers on who have been doing those kind of virtual gigs, and there just being this huge pause where usually they would be kind of encouraging some kind of audience interaction.
I think one rookie mistake I made was, obviously when you do the live streams, you can have it so the comments are streaming, so you can actually, you know, have a conversation with your audience. But I keep looking at the comments as I'm trying to sing, and then I'm starting to sing the comment rather than the lyric. So I've had to make sure that if I've got them scrolling, I'm not looking at them.
The other thing that I find is those comments kind of coming up the screen is that you're performing, and you're trying to look straight at the camera, and I'm kind of always trying to look straight at the camera, and you find like when you watch it back, you see your eyes kind of just going just below it or just to the side or something like that, and it just looks really weird. I'm sure I don't know how much people actually notice that kind of thing.
I don't know.
But
it's so difficult as well. We live in such a tiny flat that I really have nowhere particularly appropriate to record. So I record in between a cupboard door and my boiler door because it's the only real space in the house where there's like a nice white backdrop.
Yeah.
So it's
well, sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say it's not the most professional of setup in our tiny little flat.
Well, luckily I'd kind of got 2 massive banners printed off because I was supposed to be doing my tour.
Yeah.
So 2 big banners with pictures of me in my underwear on them.
Nice.
So those have been going up in the background sometimes, and sometimes not. I've been trying to kind of change walls on a regular basis. So I've been kind of when I did the virtual tour, I did one downstairs, one in the front room downstairs, one up here. I don't know, do you get kind of paranoid about the neighbours kind of hearing you, even though...
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely not done my belters while I've been doing live streams, but that is the great thing, I think, about a lot of the 1940s music. A lot of it's quite gentle, so it's not too much of a problem, but I've certainly been aware of my neighbours. But we're also starting the process of moving out, so a lot of stuff, is going into boxes and things like that, so I don't actually have things readily available like I usually would. So it has felt a bit like making do and mending with what I've got.
Yeah, we've kind of had the opposite thing where we've had to bring everything back so we can work from home.
Yeah.
And so we're literally kind of working around all of our stuff. And I actually just got to the point where I had to clear out the upstairs. We've always called it the ferret room because it's where the ferrets live. But it's now my studio, and I'm trying to rebrand it as my studio.
But it's still the
but
ferret
we still
room.
refer to the it's still the ferret room. Can you go up to the ferret room and get this thing? It's a studio. It's my studio. But the problem is that I have to put the ferrets into a smaller cage and put them in another room, or as soon as they hear me starting to sing or start performing, it's always when I press record, they then decide that they want to rattle on the cage.
Of course.
And start making a noise as well. So yeah. Any other things you want to promote at all? Anything else you want to talk about?
No, just I guess if people are curious, check me out on Facebook. I'm all right, I promise. Like, I'm not tone deaf.
What's your handle on Facebook, or the kind of name that you're under on Facebook?
So on Facebook, it's Hannah the Vintage Songbird. So
Hannah the Vintage Songbird.
Yeah, I've taken Piera out of my branding because people struggle to find it, to spell it, to pronounce it. So I was kind of getting a bit fed up of going to gigs and being called all sorts of things.
I should have actually asked you before we started recording what you would like to refer to you as.
Oh no, that's fine. It's still a pretty name, it's still part of my family's name. But no, I just thought for people to be able to find me and say my name right, Hannah was probably the easiest.
Hannah the Vintage Songbird. That's, and you're on Instagram as well?
I am, yes. It's the same, Hannah the Vintage Songbird. Very creative.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you've got to have consistent branding, haven't you? This is the thing.
Exactly.
Are you on Twitter?
I am, but I'm only just really reconnecting with Twitter. It was one of those social media channels that I didn't use all that much. Now I'm getting back into it.
I've started trying to use it more. I find that Twitter's much more for kind of snarky comments and...
Yeah. I think I use that more to follow things than I do to actually update it.
And comment and things like that. I find you have to police things on Twitter.
Yeah.
And it can be quite reactionary. Yeah.
So I tend to stick to Facebook and Instagram for anything to do with singing, and sort of use Twitter as more of a just,
Yeah. To complain to kind of the mobile networks and things like
that.
Yeah,
the local bus company.
Yeah, that's the same here as well. Okay, well, at the end of this, we're going to have us doing a duet. We haven't decided what that is yet because we're going to record it at another time.
Yes.
So I'm going to say thank you very much, Hannah, the Vintage Songbird.
Thank you for having me.
That's all right. And here is myself and Hannah singing a duet together. As of yet, I don't know what it is, so it will be surprised when it starts playing. Underneath the lantern by the barricade, darling, I remember the way you used to wait. It was there that you whispered tenderly that you loved me, you would always be my lily of the lamplight, my own Lily Marlene. Time would come for roll call, time for us to part. Darling, I'd caress you and hold you to my heart, and then neath that far-off lantern light, I'd hold you tight, we'd kiss goodnight, my lily of the lamplight, my own Lily Marlene. Orders came for sailing somewhere over there, all confined to barracks was more than I could bear. I knew you were waiting in the street, I could hear your feet, but could not meet my lily of the lamplight, my own Lily Marlene. Resting in our billet just behind the line, even though we're parted, your lips are close to mine. You wait where that lantern softly gleams, your sweet face seems to haunt my dreams, my lily of the lamplight, my own